Welcome, dear listener, to a shadowed tale from 1348, where Europe suffocates under the Black Death's merciless grip, as you settle into your soft bed, far from the stench of plague-ridden streets. Let your mind drift to a world of creaking carts and tolling bells. Picture Dr. Matthias Varn, a plague doctor, donning his beaked mask at dawn. His waxed robe is heavy with dread, and his cane taps cobblestones slick with filth. The air hums with moans, and the sky is grey with smoke from pyres burning the dead. This is no story of heroes, but of men like Matthias. Misunderstood wanderers, armed with toxic herbs and fading hope, walking among the dying. Their rituals of bloodletting, purging, and whispered prayers were as deadly as the disease, a dance of desperation in a world unready for healing. From dawn to dusk, Matthias faces terror, isolation, and the plague's relentless hunger. His mask is a frail shield against a foe no one understood. The dirty robe clings, the herbs sting his nose, and every step risks his own grave. Where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps a quiet corner in Chicago or a starry night in Mumbai. Let's follow Matthias through London's haunted alleys, where 14th century medicine meets daily dread, and discover why you wouldn't survive a single day. The bells toll softly, the air grows heavy. Settle in and let this grim journey lull you toward sleep. The first light of dawn creeps over London's jagged skyline in 1348, a faint grey glow that struggles to pierce the fog blanketing the city's narrow, twisting streets. Dr. Matthias Varn, a plague doctor, barely 30 years old, stirs on his straw pallet in a cramped attic room above a tanner's shop. The air is thick with the acrid stench of leather, the sour bite of smoke, and the ever-present decay that seeps from the plague-ravaged city below. As you settle into your soft bed, dear listener, far from the creaking shutters and mournful tolling of bells in Matthias's world, let your mind drift to this grim morning where he prepares to face the Black Death. His hands tremble as he reaches for his waxed robe, its weight a heavy promise of the day's dangers. The beaked mask waits on a rickety table, its glass eyes glinting like a silent judge, stuffed with herbs that sting his nose with futile hope against the miasma, the bad air believed to carry the plague. This is no tale of heroism, but of a man stepping into a day where survival feels like a fading dream, where dirty robes and whispered prayers are all that stand between him and the dying. Let's follow Matthias through the heavy ritual of dawn, a slow march into a world of dread where every breath is a gamble with fate. Matthias's attic is a mean, shadowed space, its walls stained with damp and soot, the ceiling so low he must stoop to avoid the beams. The straw pallet, thin and lumpy, pricks through his coarse blanket, offering little comfort against the chill that seeps through the cracked window. The city's sounds creep in, a grim symphony of sorrow, the creak of death carts rolling through the streets. Their driver's hoarse calls for the dead to be brought out, the distant wail of a widow, and the relentless tolling of church bells, their rhythms slow and mournful, counting the lives lost to the plague. Matthias's breath catches, his chest tight with the weight of the day ahead. He is no scholar trained in the grand halls of Bologna or Paris, but a barber surgeon, once skilled at clipping hair and pulling teeth, now thrust into the role of plague doctor by a city desperate for anyone to face the sickness. The Black Death has claimed nearly half of London's souls, turning bustling markets into silent graves, and Matthias, with his patchwork knowledge of herbs and humours, is all that stands between the living and the void. He rises slowly, his joints stiff from the cold floor, his body lean from months of meagre rations. The room is sparse, furnished only with a wobbly table, a single stool, and a wooden chest that holds his few possessions, a tattered Bible, a small knife for shaving, and a silver cross, a gift from his mother before she succumbed to the plague. Last spring, Matthias's fingers brushed the cross, its edges worn smooth by his anxious touch, a fleeting connection to a life before the world turned to ash. He lights a candle, its flame flickering in the draught, casting long shadows that dance across the walls like ghosts. The light reveals the plague doctor's garb, laid out the night before, a collection of strange garments that mark him as something other than human, a figure both needed and feared in this dying city. The ritual of dressing is a solemn act, as deliberate as a priest preparing for Mass. Matthias begins with the waxed robe, its heavy folds crackling as he lifts it from the table. The linen is coated with beeswax, meant to repel blood, pus, and the invisible poison of the plague, but it is far from clean. The hem is crusted with mud from London's filthy streets and faint brown stains. The remnants of yesterday's patience cling to its surface. Matthias pulls it on, the robe's weight settling over his shoulders like a yoke, its bulk making every movement slow and deliberate. The wax traps the heat of his body, already building a sweat beneath the layers, and the faint whiff of decay lingers in the fabric, a reminder of the death he carries with him. He ties the coarse laces, his fingers fumbling, each not a small act of defiance against the fear coiling in his gut. The robe reaches his ankles, brushing the floorboards, its stiffness chafing his skin, a constant irritation he has learned to endure. Next comes the wide-brimmed hat, its leather creased and worn from months of use. Matthias adjusts it, the brim casting a shadow over his eyes, which are red-rimmed from sleepless nights haunted by the faces of the dead. The hat is practical, shielding his face from the sun's glare, but it also marks him as a plague doctor, a sign to the townsfolk that he is not one of them. He is a wanderer in their world, a figure to be avoided, his presence a harbinger of the death they dread. The gloves follow, thick leather that covers his hands, their seams stiff with wear. They protect him from the sores and blood he must touch, but they also distance him, making every gesture feel foreign, as if his hands belong to another. Matthias flexes his fingers, the leather creaking softly, and feels the isolation settle deeper, a barrier between him and the world he can no longer join. The mask is the final piece, the most iconic and unsettling part of his garb. It rests on the table, its beaked shape like a bird of prey, its glass eyes glinting in the candlelight. Matthias lifts it, the leather cool against his palms, and examines the beak. A long cone stuffed with a bundle of herbs meant to purify the air. He breathes in the sharp scent of lavender, cloves, camphor, and dried mint stinging his nose, a burning sensation that makes his eyes water. The herbs are packed tightly, a defense against the miasma, the foul air believed to carry the plague. From rotting flesh and stagnant water, Matthias knows the herbs are no true shield. He has seen too many fall despite them, their bodies carted away under the same fog that cloaks the city now. Yet the herbs are part of the ritual, a tradition, rooted in the teachings of physicians who claimed the air itself was poison. He ties the mask over his face, the straps pulling tight against his scalp, the beak muffling his breath. The glass eyes narrow his vision to a tunnel, the world reduced to a hazy circle of floorboards and shadows, each step a careful navigation through a distorted reality. The mask is heavy, its weight pressing against his nose and cheeks, the leather growing warm and damp against his skin. Breathing is a labor, each inhale drawing the sharp tang of herbs, each exhale fogging the glass eyes, blurring his sight further. Matthias adjusts the straps, trying to ease the pressure, but the mask is a constant reminder of his role, a barrier. That makes him both protector and pariah. He picks up his wooden cane, its tip worn smooth from countless days tapping through London's streets, a tool to point at patients without touching their diseased flesh. The cane is simple, carved from oak, its surface polished by his grip, but it feels like an extension of his arm, a way to keep the world at bay. Matthias grips it tightly, his knuckles pale beneath the gloves, and takes a moment to steady himself, the room's walls seeming to close in, the air thick with the weight of the day ahead. Before leaving, Matthias kneels by his pallet, a small act of devotion in a world where faith is both solace and torment. He murmurs a prayer to Saint Roch, the patron of plague victims, his voice muffled by the mask, the words stumbling over his dry lips. The prayer is rote, learned in a childhood spent in church pews, but it carries little hope. Many in London believe the plague is God's wrath, a punishment for sins uncounted, and Matthias wonders if his work is defiance or penance. He rises, his knees aching from the cold floor, and slings his satchel over his shoulder. The leather bag is heavy with the tools of his trade, lancets for bloodletting, their blades sharp but stained, a small vial of theriac, a pungent mix of spices and herbs believed to cure, and a bundle of dried mint to scatter on plague sores. The satchel's strap bites into his shoulder, its weight a reminder of the futility he carries into the day. Each tool a relic of a medicine that fails more than it heals. The door creaks as Matthias steps onto the street, the tanner's shop. Below silent, its owner buried months ago. London is a husk of its former self, its once lively markets, now empty. The cobblestones slick with morning dew, and the refuse of a city in collapse. The air is thick with the sickly sweet stench of decay, a smell that clings to the back of Matthias's throat, even through the mask's herbs. Church bells toll in the distance, their slow, mournful rhythm a constant count of the dead, echoing off the shuttered houses that line the narrow streets. Matthias walks, his cane tapping a steady beat, his robe dragging through the mud, its hem growing heavier with each step. The streets are a labyrinth of timber-framed houses, their upper stories leaning inward, their windows dark, many marked with red crosses to warn of the plague within. He passes a death cart, its wheels creaking under the weight of bodies, their limbs tangled, faces frozen in agony, the driver's face hidden behind a cloth, his eyes avoiding Matthias's masked gaze. The townsfolk who remain keep their distance, their faces pale with fear, their steps quickening as Matthias approaches. A woman pulls her child into an alley, her whisper of demon cutting through the morning's quiet, her eyes wide with terror. Matthias is used to this, the fear that paints him as a monster rather than a healer. His mask, meant to protect, makes him otherworldly, a figure from nightmares, his beaked silhouette looming in the fog. He walks on, his boots squelching in the muck, the city's silence broken only by the occasional sob or the slam of a shutter. The weight of the robe, the mask, the cane, it all presses down, a physical burden matched by the dread in his heart. He is not here to save lives, not truly. He knows the plague claims most he visits, their bodies joining the carts before nightfall. Yet he must try, driven by duty, fear, or perhaps the faint hope that his work matters, even as the city crumbles. Around him, Matthias's first stop is a baker's house, its door marked with a red cross. the air inside thick with the stench of sickness and despair. He steps over the threshold, his cane tapping the floorboards, the wood warped and damp. A family huddles in the corner, their eyes wide with desperation, their faces gaunt from hunger and fear. The baker lies on a straw mat, his neck swollen with buboes, black sores that pulse with pain, his skin slick with fevered sweat. His wife kneels beside him, her hands trembling as she offers a coin, her voice breaking with pleas for salvation. Matthias kneels, his robe rustling, and examines the man, his gloved fingers probing the sores, the heat of the fever radiating through the leather. The baker's breaths are shallow, his eyes unfocused, staring past Matthias into some distant void. Matthias scatters a pinch of dried mint, its sharp scent cutting through the room's decay, and murmurs a prayer, knowing it's more for the family than the dying man. The baker will not see another dawn, his fate sealed by the plague's relentless grip. This is the ritual of dawn, a slow procession through a city drowning in death. Matthias moves from house to house, each marked with the red cross, each filled with the same desperate faces, the same swollen sores, the same shallow breaths. In a weaver's home, a young girl lies on a pallet, her small body racked with coughs, her mother weeping silently as Matthias applies a poultice of theriac, its pungent smell filling the room. In a merchant's house, an old man gasps for air, his fingers blackened, his eyes pleading for relief Matthias cannot give. Each visit is a mirror of the last, the robe growing heavier with sweat and stains, the masks, herbs fading, their scent no longer masking the stench of death. Matthias's satchel lightens as he uses his supplies, the lancets dulled, the theriac dwindling, but his heart grows heavier, each patient a weight he carries into the day. The streets between visits are no respite. Matthias passes a church. Its doors open, a priest chanting for salvation, his voice drowned by the cries of the sick spilling from a nearby hospital. The hospital is a makeshift affair, a hall filled with straw beds soaked in filth, the air thick with moans and the buzzing of flies. Matthias avoids it, knowing his work lies in the homes where families still cling to hope. He passes a market, square, once alive with vendors and laughter, now silent save for the scuttle of rats and the occasional clatter of a dropped shutter. A dog, ribs stark beneath its mangy fur, snarls as Matthias passes, its eyes glinting with hunger. The city is a graveyard, its pulse fading, and Matthias feels its weight. The fear and blame of the living resting on his shoulders, their whispers trailing him like shadows. The robe is a furnace now, the wax melting in the morning's rising. Heat, sticking to his skin like a second layer of flesh. The mask's straps dig into his scalp, the glass eyes fogging with each labored breath. The herbs scent fading to a dull burn. Matthias pauses in an alley, leaning against a wall, the cane trembling in his grip. The bells toll on their rhythm, a reminder of the hours ahead, each one a test of endurance. He thinks of his old life, a barber surgeon in a village outside London, where his days were filled with simple tasks, clipping hair, stitching cuts, easing toothaches. That world is gone, swallowed by the plague, and now he is a plague doctor, a masked figure walking a path no one else dares, his every step a dance with death. Matthias's thoughts drift to the teachings that guide him, the scraps of knowledge he clings to in this chaos. The physicians of old spoke of miasma, the bad air rising from rotting flesh and stagnant water, and Matthias follows their wisdom, though doubt gnaws at him. The herbs in his mask, the wax on his robe, they are meant to protect, but he has seen Other doctors fall, their masks no shield against the plague's hunger. The church calls it God's judgment, and Matthias wonders if his work is futile, a defiance of divine will. Yet he cannot stop. The family's pleas, the weight of his oath, they drive him forward, even as his body aches and his mind frays under the strain. The morning stretches on, the sun climbing higher, its light harsh against the fog, casting long shadows that twist through the streets. Matthias's boots sink into the mud, the robe's hem dragging heavier. It stains a map of the day's work. He passes a pile of bodies, left by a cart too full to carry them, their faces covered with cloths, their limbs stiff with death. A child watches from a doorway, her eyes hollow, and Matthias turns away, unable to meet her gaze. The mask hides his face, but not his fear, not the tremor in his hands as he grips his cane. He is no savior, only a man in a mask, armed with tools that fail, prayers that falter, and a heart that grows heavier with each step. This is the ritual of dawn, a slow, deliberate preparation for a day of dread. Matthias moves through London's haunted alleys, his robe a burden, his mask a prison, his cane a frail defense against the plague's relentless march. The city is a shadow of itself, its people clinging to life or slipping into death. And Matthias walks among them, a solitary figure marked by his strange garb and grim purpose. The bells toll on, a reminder of the hours ahead, each one a test of his endurance, his faith, his humanity. As the morning gives way to midday, Matthias carries the weight of his ritual, knowing the day will demand more than he can give, and survival is a hope as fragile as the candlelight in his attic room. The late morning sun climbs higher over London in 1348, its pale light cutting through the fog that clings to the city's twisted streets. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, moves through the muck, his waxed robe dragging, his beaked mask muffling each labored breath. The air is thick with the stench of decay, smoke, and despair, a reminder of the Black Death's relentless grip on the city. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the creaking carts and tolling bells of Matthias's world, let your mind drift to his late morning, where the tools of his trade weigh as heavily as the dread in his heart. His satchel, slung over his shoulder, holds a grim arsenal lancets, forceps, a cane, and vials of pungent herbs each item a relic of a desperate age, as likely to harm as to help. These are not instruments of healing, but symbols of a futile fight, steeped in superstition and fear. Let's walk with Matthias through the streets of London, where his strange equipment marks him as a figure of terror, and explore the grim arsenal that defines his role in this dying city. Matthias's journey begins in an alley near the baker's house, where he left a family grieving a man who will not survive the day. His boots sink into the mud, the cobblestones, slick with dew and refuse, the air heavy with the sickly sweet odor of death that no mask can fully block. The bells of St. Paul's toll in the distance, their mournful rhythm a constant companion, counting the hours as Matthias counts the dead. His satchel, heavy against his hip, contains the tools that make him a plague doctor, each one a testament to the crude medicine of the time. He pauses, leaning on his cane, its oak worn smooth by his grip, and feels the weight of his role settle deeper. The townsfolk avoid him, their eyes darting away, their whispers branding him a spectre, a demon in a beaked mask. Matthias is no hero, only a man armed with tools that fail, his every step a gamble with the plague that stalks him as closely as it does his patients. The mask is the centerpiece of his arsenal, its beaked shape both iconic and terrifying. Matthias adjusts it, the leather straps biting into his scalp, the glass eyes fogging with his breath. The beak, a long cone extending from his face, is stuffed with a bundle of herbs: lavender, cloves, camphor, and dried mint meant to purify. The air of miasma, the bad air believed to carry the plague. He breathes in, the herbs' sharp scent stinging his nose, a burning sensation that makes his eyes water. The mixture is a recipe from physicians past, men who claimed the plague rose from rotting flesh and stagnant water, poisoning the air with invisible venom. Matthias knows better, or at least suspects, having seen the herbs fail to save countless patients, their bodies carted away despite the fragrant shield. Yet he clings to the ritual, packing the beak each morning. The herbs scent a faint comfort against the stench of death that fills London's streets. The mask is heavy, its weight pressing against his cheeks, the leather damp with sweat, narrowing his vision to a tunnel of blurred shapes and shadows. The glass eyes, set into the mask's leather, are small and round, their surface scratched from months of use. They limit Matthias's sight, forcing him to turn his head to see the world, a constant reminder of his isolation. The eyes are meant to protect, to keep the miasma from entering, but they also distance him, making every glance feel like peering through a window into a world he can no longer touch. Children scream at the sight of him, their voices piercing the morning's quiet, mistaking his beaked silhouette for a monster from their nightmares. Matthias feels the weight of their fear, his heart sinking as he passes a mother pulling her child close, her eyes wide with terror. The mask is his shield, but it is also his prison, marking him as a figure apart, a wanderer among the living who belongs to the dying. The waxed robe is another cornerstone of his arsenal, its heavy folds crackling as Matthias moves. The linen, coated with beeswax, is designed to repel blood, pus, and the plague's invisible poison, but it is far from clean. The hem is crusted with mud and stains from yesterday's rounds, the wax melting in the morning's heat, sticking to his skin like a second layer of flesh. Matthias feels the robe's weight, a constant burden that slows his steps, its bulk making every movement deliberate. The robe reaches his ankles, brushing the cobblestones, its surface slick and cold to the touch. It is meant to protect, too, create a barrier between him and the sick, but it also traps the heat of his body, sweat pooling beneath the layers, the faint whiff of decay clinging to the fabric. Matthias tugs at the laces, their coarse fibers digging into his fingers, and wonders how many others wore this robe before him. How many fell to the plague despite its waxen shield. The gloves, thick leather that cover his hands, are another layer of protection, their seams stiff with wear. Matthias flexes his fingers, the leather creaking, and feels the distance they create, each touch dulled, each gesture foreign. The gloves are meant to shield him from the sores and blood of his patients, but they also isolate him, making every examination feel like a ritual performed by someone else. He remembers the first time he touched a bubo, the swollen lymph node hot and pulsing under his gloved fingers, the patient's scream echoing in his ears. The gloves did not save that man, nor the dozens after, but they are part of the arsenal, a necessary barrier in a world where touch can mean death. Matthias checks their fit, ensuring no skin is exposed, his hands trembling slightly as he prepares for the day's work. The wooden cane, carved from oak, is a simpler tool but no less vital. Matthias grips it, its tip worn smooth from tapping. Through London's streets, a way to point at patients without touching their diseased flesh. The cane is an extension of his arm, a tool to maintain distance, to prod at sores or lift a patient's limb without risking contact. Its surface is polished by his grip, the wood warm against his gloved hand, a small comfort in the chaos of his role. Matthias uses it to navigate the uneven cobblestones, its steady tap, a rhythm that anchors him as he moves from house to house. Once, a child grabbed the cane, thinking it a toy, and Matthias pulled it back, his heart racing at the thought of the plague clinging to its surface. The cane is both tool and talisman, a frail defense against the sickness that surrounds him. The satchel, slung over Matthias's shoulder, is the heart of his grim arsenal, a leather bag heavy with the tools of his trade. He opens it, the leather creaking, and checks its contents. Lancets for bloodletting, their blades sharp but stained with use, forceps for plucking at sores, and vials of theriac, a pungent mix of spices, herbs, and sometimes viper flesh, believed to cure the plague. The theriac smell is overpowering, a sickly sweet burn that mixes with the herbs in his mask, making his head swim. Matthias also carries dried mint to scatter on sores, and a small book of prayers, its pages worn from constant use. The satchel's strap bites into his shoulder, its weight a constant reminder of the futility he carries. Each tool is a relic of a medicine rooted in superstition, in the belief that balancing the body's humors or warding off miasma could defeat the plague. Matthias knows their limits, has seen their failures, yet he clings to them, for they are all he has. As Matthias moves through the streets, his arsenal shapes his every action. He stops at a weaver's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the stench of sickness. A young girl lies on a straw pallet, her body racked with coughs, her neck swollen with buboes. Matthias kneels, his robe rustling, and opens his satchel, the leather creaking as he pulls out a lancet. The blade gleams in the dim light, its edge sharp enough to slice through fevered skin. He presses it to the girl's arm. Her cry sharp as blood wells up, a dark trickle he believes might balance her humors. The theory, taught by physicians who never faced the plague, feels hollow, but Matthias follows it, his hands steady despite the doubt in his heart. He scatters mint on her sores, its sharp scent cutting through the room's decay, and murmurs a prayer, his voice muffled by the mask. The girl's mother watches, her eyes pleading, but Matthias knows the lancet will not save her daughter, just as it failed the baker that morning. The forceps, small and rusted, are next, used to probe the buboes to see if they might burst or drain. Matthias grips them, their metal cold through his gloves, and works carefully, the girl's whimpers filling the room. The buboes are hard, pulsing with infection, and the forceps do little but cause pain. Matthias sets them aside, their rust a reminder of their age, their ineffectiveness. The thoriac comes next, a thick paste he smears on the sores, its smell so strong it makes the mother gag. The mixture, made of dozens of ingredients, myrrh, saffron, even crushed scorpions, is a costly relic of ancient medicine, believed to draw out poison. Matthias applies it, his gloved fingers trembling, knowing it's more ritual than cure. A gesture to ease the mother's fear rather than the girl's suffering. He closes his satchel, the leather creaking, and steps back, his cane tapping the floorboards as he leaves the family to their grief. The streets are busier now, the late morning bringing out the few who dare to venture forth. Matthias passes a market square, its stalls empty, the air heavy with the buzz of flies and the stench of rotting fruit left behind by fleeing vendors. A dog, ribs stark beneath its mangy fur, snarls as he passes, its eyes glinting with hunger. The townsfolk keep their distance, their faces pale, their steps quickening as Matthias's beaked silhouette looms in the fog. A man spits in his path, muttering about demons, and Matthias feels the sting of their fear, their blame. His arsenal, meant to protect, marks him as other, a figure to be shunned. The mask's herbs are fading now, their scent dulled by his sweat, the robe's wax melting, sticking to his skin. The cane taps on, its rhythm steady, but Matthias's heart races. Each step a reminder of the plague that could claim him as icily as his patience. The historical context of these tools is rooted in the medicine of the time, a blend of ancient wisdom and desperate improvisation. The beaked mask, inspired by physicians like Charles Delorme, was a new invention, its design based on the belief that miasma carried the plague. The herbs, chosen for their strong scents, were thought to purify the air, a theory passed down from Galen and Hippocrates, but they did nothing against the fleas that truly spread the disease. The waxed robe, too, was a practical choice. Its slick surface meant to repel infection, but it offered no real protection, only a false sense of safety. The lancets and forceps, tools of barber surgeons, were used to balance humors, a cornerstone of medieval medicine that saw illness as an imbalance of blood, phlegm, bile, and melancholy. Thariac, a concoction dating back to Roman times, was a prized remedy. Its complex recipe a symbol of the era's faith in alchemy over science. Matthias, like his peers, uses these tools because they are all he has. Their ineffectiveness, a secret he carries with each patient he fails. Matthias's emotional toll is as heavy as his physical burden. The mask, robe, and gloves isolate him, making every interaction a ritual performed at a distance. He thinks of his sister, lost to the plague last winter, her face pale and still as he closed her eyes. The memory haunts him, her voice echoing in the quiet moments between houses. He wonders if his tools, his rituals, are a betrayal of her memory, a futile attempt to fight what cannot be fought. The cane, tapping through the streets, feels like a metronome counting his own dwindling days, each step a question of when the plague will find him. The satchel's weight pulls at his shoulder, its contents a reminder of his failures, the patients he could not save, the families left weeping. Yet he continues, driven by a stubborn duty, a flicker of hope, or perhaps the fear of stopping, of facing the silence of his own heart. The city itself is a canvas of despair, its streets a labyrinth of timber-framed houses, their windows dark, many marked with red crosses. Matthias passes a church, its doors open, a priest's chant mingling with the cries of the sick. A hospital looms nearby, a hall of straw beds. Soaked in filth, the air thick with moans and the stench of death. Matthias avoids it, his work in the homes where families still cling to hope. He passes a pile of bodies, left by a cart too full to carry them, their faces covered with cloths, their limbs stiff. A child watches from a doorway, her eyes hollow, and Matthias turns away, the mask hiding his own grief. The bells toll on, their rhythm a reminder of the day's relentless march, each hour a test of his endurance. As late morning fades, Matthias's arsenal feels heavier, the robe a furnace, the mask a suffocating weight. The herbs are nearly spent, their scent a faint whisper against the city's stench. The lancets, forceps, and theriac have done little. They use a ritual to comfort the living rather than save the dying. Matthias grips his cane, its tap steady, and moves toward his next patient, a merchant whose house lies at the edge of the city. The streets grow narrower, the fog thicker, the air heavy with the weight of death. Matthias is a solitary figure, his beaked mask a symbol of both hope and horror, his arsenal a collection of relics that cannot win this war. Yet he walks on, the tools of his trade his only companions, a grim arsenal in a city of ghosts. The late morning sun hangs heavy over London in 1348, its light dulled by the fog that curls through the city's narrow streets, thick with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges onward, his waxed robe dragging through the mud, his beaked mask muffling each laboured breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's echo in the distance, a mournful rhythm counting the dead, while the creak of death carts and the wails of the grieving filled the air. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones, slick with filth and the cries of the dying, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the medicine of the 14th century is a grim dance of superstition and suffering. His satchel, heavy with lancets, dariac and herbs, offers no cures, only rituals that harm as often as they comfort. Bloodletting, purges, and amulets are the tools of a desperate age. Rooted in beliefs of miasma and divine wrath, each treatment, a futile gesture against the Black Death's relentless hunger. Let's follow Matthias through the late morning, where his work among the sick is a slow march through misery, and the weight of failure grows heavier with each step. Matthias stands outside a merchant's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the sickly sweet stench of sickness. His robe, stiff with wax, clings to his sweat-soaked skin, the mask's herbs fading, their sharp scent of lavender and cloves no longer masking the city's decay. The merchant, a stout man named Thomas, lies on a straw pallet, his neck swollen with buboes, black sores that pulse with pain, his eyes glassy with fever. His wife, her face pale and drawn, clutches a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. As Matthias kneels beside the man, his cane tapping the floorboards, the medicine he practices is no science but a patchwork of ancient theories and desperate hopes. Grounded in the belief that the plague stems from miasma, the bad air rising, from rotting flesh, or from God's wrath, a punishment for humanity's sins. Matthias's tools, his rituals, they are all he has, but they are as likely to hasten death as to delay it. Bloodletting is the first treatment, a cornerstone of medieval medicine rooted in the teachings of Galen, who claimed the body's human phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile must be balanced to restore health. Matthias opens his satchel, the leather creaking, and pulls out a lancet, its blade sharp but stained from countless uses. The merchant's arm is pale, veins standing out like cords, and Matthias presses the lancet to the skin, his gloved fingers steady despite the doubt in his heart. The blade bites, a thin line of blood welling up, dark and sluggish, dripping onto the straw below. Thomas groans, his body trembling, and Matthias watches the blood pool, believing it might draw out the plague's poison. The theory is ancient, passed down through generations, but Matthias has seen too many patients weaken after bleeding, their faces paler, their breaths shallower. He binds the wound with a cloth, its fibers rough against the merchant's skin, and murmurs a prayer, his voice muffled by the mask, knowing the bloodletting is more ritual than remedy. The wife watches, her eyes wide with hope and fear, clutching her rosary tighter. Matthias feels her gaze, the weight of her trust, and it presses against him like the robe's heavy folds. He scatters dried mint on the buboes, its sharp scent cutting through the room's decay, a gesture meant to purify. The sores, The mint does little, Matthias knows, but it calms the wife, gives her something to cling to in this house of death. He moves to the next treatment, a purge to expel the body's corrupted humors. From his satchel, he pulls a vial of bitter herbs, wormwood, rue, and gentian mixed into a foul paste. He spoons it into Thomas's mouth, the merchant gagging, his face twisting as the bitter taste coats his tongue. The purge is meant to cleanse, to drive out the plague through vomiting or diarrhea. But Matthias has seen it weaken the sick, their bodies too frail to endure the violent expulsion. Thomas retches, his body convulsing, and Matthias steps back, his cane steadying him, the mask hiding his grimace. Theriac is next, a prized concoction believed to be a universal cure, its recipe dating back to Roman times. Matthias opens a small vial, its contents a thick, pungent paste of spices, herbs, and sometimes viper flesh. The smell so strong it makes the wife turn away. He smears it on Thomas's buboes, the paste sticking to his gloved fingers, its heat radiating through the leather. Theriac is costly, a mixture of myrrh, saffron, frankincense, and dozens of other ingredients, ground together in a process as much alchemy as medicine. Matthias was taught its virtues by an old apothecary, who claimed it could draw out poison, balance humors, and ward off miasma. But Matthias has seen it fail, the sores growing blacker, the fever burning hotter, despite the Theriac's promise. He applies it anyway, the ritual a comfort to the family, a way to fill the silence with action. Even if that action is futile, amulets hang from Matthias's neck, small charms of bone and stone, inscribed with prayers or symbols to ward off evil. He touches one, a crude cross carved with Latin words, and places it on Thomas's chest, murmuring a prayer to Saint Sebastian, the protector against plagues. The amulet is a relic of faith, a belief that divine intervention might succeed where herbs and lancets fail. The wife nods, her eyes glistening, and Matthias feels a pang of guilt, knowing the amulet is as powerless as his other tools. The church's teachings weigh heavily, the plague seen as God's judgment, and Matthias wonders if his work is defiance or submission. He scatters more mint, it sent a fleeting shield against the room's stench, and steps back, his cane tapping as he prepares to leave. Thomas's breaths are weaker now, his face grey, and Matthias knows he will not survive the night. The next house is a weaver's, its air thick with the smell of wool and sickness. A young girl lies on a pallet, her small body racked with coughs, her neck swollen with buboes, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Matthias kneels, his robe rustling, and begins the same rituals, bloodletting, purging, Theriac, and amulets each step, a mirror of the last. The girl's mother weeps silently, her hands clutching a cloth stained with blood, and Matthias works quickly, his gloved fingers trembling as he slices the lancet across the girl's arm. The blood is thin, barely flowing, a sign of the plagues. Deep hold, he applies the Theriac, its pungent smell filling the room, and scatters mint. The herbs are faint comfort in a house heavy with despair. The girl's coughs grow weaker, her breaths rattling, and Matthias knows she is slipping away, another name for the death carts. The rituals continue, house after house, each marked with a red cross, each filled with the same desperate faces, the same swollen sores, the same shallow breaths. Matthias moves through the city, his satchel lighter with each visit, his heart heavier. In a tanner's home, an old man lies dying, his fingers blackened, his eyes pleading for relief. Matthias bleeds him, the lancet's bite drawing a weak groan, and applies a poultice of theriac and mint, its scent mingling with the room's decay. The man's son watches, his face hard with grief, and Matthias feels the weight of his failure. The tools in his satchel no match for the plague's hunger. He murmurs a prayer, his voice muffled, and moves on, the cane tapping a steady rhythm through the streets. The medicine of the time is a tapestry of superstition and tradition, woven from the teachings of ancient physicians and the churches. Doctrines, the theory of humors dominates, the belief that illness comes from an imbalance of blood, phlegm, bile, and melancholy. Bloodletting, purges, and theriac are meant to restore this balance, to drive out the plague's poison, but has seen their limits. The miasma theory, too, shapes his work. The idea that bad air carries the disease, rising from rotting flesh and stagnant water. His mask, his herbs, his robe, they are all designed to combat this invisible poison, but Matthias suspects that truth has seen the fleas on the dying. Their bite's a clue he cannot fully grasp. The church's influence is stronger still, the plague seen as divine punishment, and Matthias's prayers and amulets are as much a part of his arsenal as his lancets, a desperate plea for mercy in a world that offers none. Matthias's emotional toll is as heavy as his physical burden. Each house, each patient, adds to the weight he carries, the faces of the dying etched into his mind. He thinks of his sister, lost to the plague last winter, her pale face haunting his quiet moments. The memory drives him, a need to save others where he failed her, but it also breaks him, each failure a reminder of her death. The mask hides his tears, the robe his trembling hands, but nothing hides the despair that grows with each visit. He wonders if he is a healer or a harbinger, his tools a mockery of the hope he once held. The bells toll on their rhythm, a reminder of the hours slipping away, each one a test of his endurance, his faith, his humanity. The city is a canvas of suffering, its streets a labyrinth of timber-framed houses, their windows dark, many marked with red crosses. Matthias passes a church, its doors open, a priest's chant mingling with the cries of the sick from a nearby hospital. The hospital is a hall of straw beds soaked in filth, the air thick with moans and the buzzing of flies. Matthias avoids it, his work in the homes, where families still cling to hope. He passes a market square, once alive with vendors, now silent, save for the scuttle of rats and the stench of rotting fruit. A dog, ribs stark beneath its mangy fur, snarls as he passes, its eyes glinting with hunger. The townsfolk keep their distance, their faces pale, their whispers branding him a demon, a spectre in a beaked mask. As early afternoon approaches, Matthias's body aches, the robe a furnace, the mask a suffocating weight. The herbs are nearly spent, their scent a faint whisper against the city's stench. The lancets, forceps, and theriac have done little. They use a ritual to comfort the living rather than save the dying. Matthias grips his cane, its tap steady, and moves toward his next patient, a cobbler whose house lies near the river. The streets grow narrower, the fog thicker, the air heavy with the weight of death. Matthias is a solitary figure, his beaked mask a symbol of both hope and horror, his medicine a collection of rituals that cannot win this war. Yet he walks on, the tools of his trade his only companions, a grim arsenal in a city of ghosts. The afternoon sun struggles through the fog over London in 1348, its dim light casting long shadows across streets thick with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges onward, his waxed robe heavy with mud, his beaked mask muffling each labored breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's blend with the creak of death carts and the moans of the dying, a grim chorus that fills the air. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones slick with filth and the cries of the grieving, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the afternoon is a relentless march through homes and plague pits. His satchel sags, its lancets and herbs nearly spent, his cane tapping a steady rhythm through a city drowning in death. Matthias walks among the dead, a masked figure offering futile poultices and prayers, his presence a flicker of hope in a landscape of loss. Let's follow him through the streets, where every house holds sorrow, and the weight of the Black Death presses heavier with each step. Matthias moves through a narrow alley, his boots squelching in the mud, the air thick, with the sickly sweet odor of rotting flesh that seeps from every corner of London. His robe, stiff with wax, clings to his sweat-soaked skin. The mask's herbs fading, their lavender and clove scent no longer masking the city's stench. The glass eyes of his mask fog with each exhale, narrowing his vision to a hazy tunnel. Of cobblestones and shuttered houses, the bells toll on their mournful rhythm counting the dead, a reminder of the hours slipping away. Matthias's body aches, his shoulders sore from the satchel's weight, his scalp raw from the mask's straps. Yet he presses forward, driven by duty or desperation, his cane tapping a path through a city that feels more graveyard than home. His first stop is a tailor's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside heavy with the stench of sickness and fear. Matthias steps over the threshold, his robe rustling, his cane tapping the warped floorboards. A family huddles in the corner, their faces gaunt, their eyes wide with desperation. The tailor, a thin man with greying hair, lies on a straw pallet, his neck swollen with buboes, black sores that pulse with pain, his breaths shallow and ragged. His daughter, barely 16, kneels beside him, her hands trembling as she clutches a cloth stained with blood. She looks at Matthias, her eyes pleading for a miracle, but he knows none will come. He kneels, his gloved fingers probing the sores, the heat of fever radiating through the leather. The tailor's eyes are glassy, staring past Matthias into some distant void, and Matthias scatters dried mint, its sharp scent a faint shield against the room's decay. He murmurs a prayer to Saint Rock, his voice muffled by the mask, knowing it's more for the daughter than the dying man. Matthias opens his satchel, the leather creaking, and pulls out a vial of theriac. Its pungent paste, a mix of spices and herbs that burns his nose even through the mask. He smears it on the tailor's buboes, the paste sticking to his gloves, its heat a cruel mockery of healing. The daughter watches, her hands twisting the cloth, her lips moving in silent prayer. Matthias knows the theriac will do little, has seen it fail too many times, but he applies it anyway, the ritual a gesture to ease her fear. He tries bloodletting next, his lancet slicing the tailor's arm, a thin trickle of blood dripping onto the straw. The man groans, his body trembling, but the blood is sluggish, a sign of the plague's deep hold. Matthias binds the wound, his fingers trembling, and steps back, his cane tapping as he prepares to leave. The daughter's sob follows him out, a sound that lingers in his ears, joining the chorus of grief that haunts his day. The streets are a labyrinth of timber-framed houses, their upper stories leaning inward, their windows dark, many marked with red crosses. Matthias passes a death cart, its wheels creaking under the weight of bodies, their limbs tangled, faces covered with cloths, frozen in agony. The driver, his face hidden behind a rag, avoids Matthias's gaze, his hands quick as he piles another corpse onto the cart. Matthias feels the weight of their silence, the unspoken truth that these bodies were once his patients, men and women he tried to save with his futile tools. He walks on, his cane tapping, the mud sucking at his boots, the air thick with the buzz of flies and the stench of decay. A dog, ribs stark beneath its mangy fur, snarls as he passes, its eyes glinting with hunger. The townsfolk keep their distance, their faces pale, their whispers branding Matthias a demon, a spectre in a beaked mask. He feels their fear, their blame, a weight heavier than the robe that clings to his skin. Matthias's next stop is a plague pit, a gaping wound in the earth at the edge of the city, where bodies are dumped when the carts can hold no more. The pit is a horrific sight, a tangle of limbs and faces, some covered with shrouds, others exposed to the flies that swarm in the afternoon heat. The stench is overwhelming, a sickly sweet rot that seeps through Matthias's mask, making his stomach churn. He stands at the edge, his cane planted in the mud, and watches as two men, their faces wrapped in cloths, toss another body into the pit, its fall muffled by the mass below. Matthias murmurs a prayer, his voice lost in the wind, a futile gesture. 4 souls already gone. The pit is a reminder of his failure, each body a patient he could not save, their sores and fevers untouched by his herbs and lancets. He turns away, his heart heavy, the bells tolling in the distance, their rhythm a relentless count of the dead. The makeshift hospitals are no better, halls of straw beds soaked in filth, where the sick are left to die when homes can no longer hold them. Matthias enters one, its air thick with moans and the buzzing of flies, the stench of pus and decay so strong it drowns the herbs in his mask. The beds are crowded, bodies pressed close, their faces pale, their eyes glassy with pain. A woman reaches for Matthias, her hand trembling, her neck swollen with buboes, her voice a hoarse plea for help. He kneels, his robe brushing the filthy straw, and applies a poultice of theriac, its pungent smell filling the air. The woman's eyes follow him, her hope awaits he cannot bear. He scatters mint, murmurs a prayer, and moves on, his cane tapping. Through the rows of the dying, each one a mirror of the last. The hospital is a purgatory, a place where hope goes to die, and Matthias feels its despair settle into his bones. The historical context of this devastation is rooted in the Black Death's merciless spread. By 1348, the plague has killed nearly half of London's population, turning a thriving city into a charnel house. The disease, carried by fleas on rats, is a mystery to Matthias and his peers, who blame miasma or divine wrath. The red crosses on doors, the plague pits, the hospitals, they are desperate measures in a world without answers, where medicine is more ritual than science. Matthias's role, born of necessity, is a product of this chaos. Barber surgeons and apothecaries pressed into service when trained physicians fled or died. The townsfolk see him as both savior and demon, their fear and hope intertwined. And Matthias carries this burden with every step, his mask hiding the doubt that gnaws at him. Matthias's emotional toll is as crushing as the physical weight of his garb. Each house, each pit, each hospital adds to the gallery of faces in his mind: the tailor's daughter, the woman in the hospital, the countless others whose names he never learned. He thinks of his mother, lost to the plague last spring, her face pale as he closed her eyes, her hand cold in his. The memory is a wound, reopened with each patient he fails, each prayer that goes unanswered. The mask hides his tears, the robe his trembling hands, but nothing hides the despair that grows with each step. He wonders if he is a healer or a witness, his tools and prayers a mockery of the hope he once held. The bells toll on their rhythm, a reminder of the hours slipping away, each one a test of his endurance, his faith, his humanity. The city is a canvas of suffering, its streets a maze of death and despair. Matthias passes a church, its doors open, a priest's chant mingling with the cries of the sick. A market square, once alive with vendors, is now silent save for the scuttle of rats and the stench of rotting fruit. A child watches from a doorway, her eyes hollow, and Matthias turns away, unable to meet her gaze. The mask hides his face, but not his fear, not the tremor in his hands as he grips his cane. He is a solitary figure, his beaked silhouette looming in the fog, his presence a reminder of the death that stalks them all. The townsfolk's whispers follow him, their fear a weight heavier than the robe, their blame a wound deeper than any lancet could cut. As the afternoon fades, Matthias's body aches, the robe a furnace, the mask a suffocating prison. The herbs are spent, their scent a faint whisper against the city's stench. His satchel is nearly empty, the lancets dulled, the theriac gone, his prayers reduced to a hoarse murmur. He moves toward his next stop, a blacksmith's house near the river, the cane tapping a steady rhythm through the mud. The streets grow darker, the fog thicker, the air heavy with the weight of death. Matthias is a ghost among the living, his mask a symbol of both hope and horror, his journey a relentless march through a city of the dead. Yet he walks on, driven by a stubborn duty, a flicker of hope, or perhaps the fear of stopping, of facing the silence of his own heart. The late afternoon sun sinks low over London in 1348, its fading light swallowed by the fog that curls through the city's narrow streets, heavy with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges through the mud, his waxed robe dragging, his beaked mask muffling each labored breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's fade into a distant murmur, their rhythm drowned by the creak of death carts and the soft cries of the grieving. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones, slick with filth and the weight of a city's sorrow, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the late afternoon is a quiet descent into solitude. No one embraces. A plague doctor, no hand offers comfort. Their lives are a shadowed existence, shunned by a society that needs yet dreads them. Matthias's robe, stained and heavy, is a barrier as much as his mask, sealing him away from the world he tries to save. Let's follow him through the waning hours, where isolation is his closest companion, and the flicker of a candle is his only warmth in a city of ghosts. Matthias pauses in an alley near the River Thames, its waters sluggish and dark, reflecting the grey sky above. His boots sink into the mud, the cobblestones slick with refuse, the air thick with the sickly sweet odour of death that clings to his robe. The mask's glass eyes fogged with his breath, narrowing his vision to a hazy tunnel of shadows and shuttered houses. His satchel, nearly empty of herbs and theriac, sags against his hip, its strap biting into his shoulder. The cane in his hand, worn smooth by countless days, taps a steady rhythm, a lifeline in the silence that surrounds him. The townsfolk keep their distance, their faces pale, their eyes darting away as Matthias's beaked silhouette looms in the fog. A woman crosses the street, pulling her shawl tight, her whisper of demon cutting through the quiet. Matthias feels the sting of her fear, a wound deeper than any lancet could inflict, and knows he is no longer part of their world. His life is a solitary one, a life apart from the warmth of human connection. Once, Matthias had friends, a family, a place in the village where he worked as a barber surgeon, clipping hair and easing toothaches. Now, those ties are severed, burned away by the plague that claimed his mother, his sister, and the community he knew. The townsfolk need him, their pleas for help echoing in every red-crossed house. But they fear him more, his mask and robe marking him as a harbinger of death. No one invites him to share their bread. No hand touches his, even through the leather. Gloves that shield his skin. Matthias is a ghost among the living. His presence a reminder of the plague's relentless hunger. His role a curse as much as a duty. He walks alone, his cane tapping, the bells tolling, the city's sorrow a weight he carries in his chest. Matthias's isolation is not just physical but emotional, a chasm that grows with each passing day. He thinks of his sister, Anna, her laughter bright in the memory of a summer long gone, her face pale as he closed her eyes last winter. The loss is a constant ache, a wound reopened with each patient he fails, each family he leaves weeping. He wonders if he could have saved her, if his lancets or prayers might have made a difference, but the thought is a torment, a question without answer. The mask hides his tears, the robe his trembling hands, but nothing hides the loneliness that settles into his bones, a cold heavier than the fog that wraps the city. Matthias has no home beyond his cramped attic room, no family beyond the ghosts in his mind, no future beyond the next house, the next patient, the next death. He stops at a small church, its doors ajar, the faint chant of a priest drifting out, a plea for salvation in a world that feels forsaken. Matthias steps inside, his robe rustling, his cane tapping the stone floor. The church is nearly empty, its pews dusty, its air thick with the scent of wax and incense. A single candle flickers on the altar, its light casting shadows that dance across the walls, like the spirits of those Matthias could not save. He kneels, his knees aching against the cold stone, and murmurs a prayer to Saint Roch, the patron of plague victims, his voice muffled by the mask. The words are rote, a habit from childhood, but they offer no comfort, only a ritual to fill the silence. Matthias touches the silver cross at his neck, its edges worn smooth, a gift from his mother before she too fell to the plague. The cross is his only tether to the past, a reminder of a life where he was not alone, not feared. The priest, an old man with a lined face, glances at Matthias, but does not approach, his eyes wary, his hands clutching a rosary. Even here, in a house of God, Matthias is an outcast, his mask a barrier no prayer can breach. He rises, his robe heavy with the day's stains, and steps back into the street, the fog thicker now, the sun a faint glow behind the clouds. The bells toll on their rhythm, a reminder of the hours slipping away, each one a test of his endurance. Matthias thinks of the tavern he once frequented, its warmth and laughter a distant memory, a place he can no longer enter. The townsfolk would scatter at his approach, their fear a wall he cannot climb. He is needed, yes, but only as a tool, a figure to face the plague so they do not have to. Matthias's next stop is a cobbler's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the stench of leather and sickness. A young boy lies on a straw pallet, his face pale, his neck swollen with buboes, his breaths shallow and ragged. His mother, her eyes red from weeping, clutches his hand, her voice breaking as she begs Matthias to save him. Matthias kneels, his robe brushing the filthy floor, and opens his satchel, the leather creaking as he pulls out a vial of thuriac. He smears the pungent paste on the boy's sores, it smells sharp in the air, and scatters dried mint, a futile gesture against the plague's grip. The boy's eyes follow him, wide with fear, and Matthias feels the weight of that gaze, a hope he cannot fulfill. He murmurs a prayer, his voice hoarse, and steps back, his cane tapping as he leaves the mother to her grief. The boy will not survive the night, and Matthias knows he will carry his face, his mother's sobs, into the silence of his own solitude. The streets are quieter now, the late afternoon bringing a hush to the city, as if even the living hold their breath. Matthias passes a market square, its stalls empty, the air heavy with the buzz of flies and the stench of rotting fruit. A dog, ribs stark beneath its mangy fur, snarls as he passes, its eyes glinting with hunger. The townsfolk keep their distance, their faces pale, their whispers trailing Matthias like shadows. A man spits in his path, muttering about demons, and Matthias feels the sting of his contempt, a wound that joins the others in his heart. His robe is a furnace, the wax melting, in the day's heat, sticking to his skin. The mask's straps dig into his scalp, the glass eyes fogging, the herbs spent. Their scent a faint whisper against the city's decay. His satchel is nearly empty, its contents used up in a morning of futile rituals, and Matthias feels the weight of his isolation, a burden heavier than the tools he carries to cope. Matthias clings to small rituals of his own, moments of solace in a life stripped of connection. In a quiet alley, he pauses, leaning against a wall, his cane planted in the mud. He pulls a small flask of wine from his satchel, its contents sour, but warm, and sips it through the mask's narrow opening, the liquid burning his throat. The wine is no comfort, only a way to dull the edges of his fear, his loneliness. He thinks of the other plague doctors, men he has seen in passing, their beaked masks mirroring his own, their eyes hidden but haunted. They do not speak, do not share their burdens, for they too are apart, each one an island in a sea of death. Matthias wonders if they, like him, find solace in wine, in prayer, or in the dark humor that sometimes escapes his lips, a bitter laugh. At the absurdity of his role, the historical context of this isolation is rooted in the Black Death's devastation. By 1348, the plague has turned London into a city of ghosts, its population halved, its social bonds frayed by fear. Plague doctors, often untrained barber surgeons, like Matthias, were thrust into roles no one else would take, their strange garb and grim tasks setting them apart. The townsfolk saw them as both saviors and omens, their masks a symbol of hope and horror. The church, a dominant force, preached that the plague was divine punishment, and Matthias's work was seen as defiance by some, desperation by others. His isolation was not just social but practical. Touching the sick risked spreading the disease, and many doctors lived apart, their homes empty, their lives reduced to their work. Matthias's solitude is a product of this world, a necessity that becomes a punishment, his mask a barrier no one dares cross. Matthias's emotional toll is a constant weight, heavier than the robe, deeper than the mud that clings to his boots. He thinks of his friend, a fellow barber surgeon named John, who laughed with him over ale before the plague came. John is gone, his body lost to a plague pit, and Matthias wonders if he could have saved him, if his prayers or lancets might have made a difference. The thought is a torment, a question that haunts his quiet moments. He sees Anna's face, her smile fading in his memory, and feels the guilt of surviving where she did not. The mask hides his tears, the robe his trembling hands, but nothing hides the loneliness that grows with each step, each house, each death. Matthias is a man adrift, his life apart from the world he tries to save, his heart a silent cry in a city of sorrow. As the afternoon fades into evening, Matthias returns to his attic room. The tanner's shop below silent, its stench of leather mingling with the city's decay. He lights a candle, its flame flickering in the draught, casting shadows across the walls. He removes his mask, the straps leaving red marks on his scalp, the air cool against his sweat-soaked face. The robe falls to the floor, it stains a map of the day's work, and Matthias sits on his pallet, the straw pricking through his thin blanket. He sips his wine, the flask trembling in his hands, and murmurs a prayer, the words empty now, a habit to fill the silence. The bells toll on their rhythm, a reminder of the day's end. The nights approach, and the solitude that waits like a shadow. The city is a canvas of loss, its streets a labyrinth of grief and fear. Matthias's life apart is a necessity, a sacrifice for a city that needs him but will not embrace him. He is a ghost among the living, his mask a symbol of his role, his isolation a wound that deepens with each day. The candle flickers, its light a faint warmth in a world gone cold, and Matthias closes his eyes, the faces of the dead waiting in his dreams. Yet he will rise at dawn, don his robe and mask, and walk again. A solitary figure in a city of ghosts, driven by a duty he cannot abandon. The early evening sky darkens over London in 1348, its fading light swallowed by the fog that clings to the city's narrow streets, thick with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges through the mud, his waxed robe heavy with the day's stains, his beaked mask muffling each laboured breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's grow faint, their rhythm drowned by the creak of death carts and the distant wails of the grieving. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones, slick with filth and the weight of a city's sorrow, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the early evening is a quiet descent into the mind's slow fracture. The faces of the dead, the screams of the dying, and the endless futility of his work press against his thoughts, a relentless tide eroding his sanity. Matthias is a ghost among the living, his mask hiding the cracks in his mind, his heart heavy with the burden of a day spent walking among the dead. Let's follow him through the waning hours, where despair and detachment grow, and the flicker of a lantern is his only guide in a city of shadows. Matthias pauses in a narrow alley near the Thames, its waters dark and sluggish, reflecting the grey sky above. His boots sink into the mud, the cobblestones slick with refuse, the air thick with the sickly sweet odour of death that seeps through his mask's fading herbs. The glass eyes fog with each exhale, narrowing his vision to a hazy tunnel of shadows and shuttered houses. His satchel, nearly empty, sags against his hip, its strap biting into his shoulder, the last of his theriac and mint used on a boy who will not see dawn. The cane in his hand, worn smooth by countless days, taps a steady rhythm, a lifeline in the silence that surrounds him. The townsfolk avoid him, their faces pale, their eyes darting away as his beaked silhouette looms in the fog. A man mutters a curse, his voice low but sharp, and Matthias feels the sting, a wound that joins the others in his fracturing mind. The weight of the day presses harder now, the faces of the dead crowding his thoughts. The tailor's daughter, her eyes wide with hope he could not fulfill. The boy in the cobbler's house, his coughs echoing as Matthias left him to die. The woman in the hospital, her hand reaching for him, her plea unanswered. Each face is a shard in his mind, a memory that cuts deeper with each step. Matthias has seen too much bodies piled like firewood in plague pits. A merchant's final gasp, a child's lifeless stare frozen in the morning light. The mask hides his expression, but not the tremor in his hands. Not the hollow laughter that escapes his lips at odd moments, bitter and sharp, a sound that startles even him. The laughter is a crack in his armor, a sign of the mind's slow fracture. A desperate release from the horror that surrounds him. Matthias's thoughts are a tangled maze, a blend of fear, guilt, and detachment that grows with each patient he fails. He thinks of his sister Anna, her face pale as he closed her eyes last winter, her laughter a distant echo in a world gone silent. The guilt is a constant ache, a question of whether he could have saved her, whether his lancets or prayers might have made a difference. The thought is a torment, a loop that plays in the quiet moments between houses, between deaths. He sees her in every child he treats, her eyes in theirs, her voice in their cries. The mask hides his tears, but not the weight of her memory, not the despair that gnaws at his heart. Matthias wonders if he is still human, or if the plague has taken that too, leaving only a masked figure walking a path of endless loss to cope. Matthias clings to small rituals, fragile threads to hold his mind together. He stops at a small church, its doors ajar, the faint glow of a lantern spilling onto the stone steps. He steps inside, his robe rustling, his cane tapping the floor, the air thick with the scent of wax and incense. The church is empty save for a lone priest, his voice a soft chant, his eyes avoiding Matthias's masked gaze. Matthias kneels before a candle, its flame flickering in the draught, casting shadows that dance like the ghosts in his mind. He murmurs a prayer to Saint Sebastian, the protector against plagues, his voice hoarse, the words stumbling over his dry lips. The prayer is a habit, a ritual to anchor him, but it offers no comfort, only a momentary pause in the tide of despair. He touches the silver cross at his neck, its edges worn smooth, a gift from his mother before she fell to the plague. The cross is his only tether to the past, a reminder of a life where he was not alone, not feared. The priest glances at Matthias, his face lined with exhaustion, his hands clutching a rosary. Matthias feels the distance between them, a chasm no prayer can bridge. Even in this house of God, he is an outcast, his mask a barrier, his role a curse. He rises, his knees aching against the cold stone, and steps back into the street. The fog thicker now, the evening's chill settling into his bones. The bells toll faintly, their rhythm a reminder of the hours slipping away, each one a test of his endurance. Matthias thinks of the tavern he once knew, its warmth and laughter a memory he can no longer touch. The townsfolk would scatter at his approach, their fear a wall he cannot climb. He is needed, yes, but only as a tool, a figure to face the plague so they do not have to. Matthias's next stop is a baker's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside heavy with the stench of sickness and despair. A woman lies on a straw pallet, her face pale, her neck swollen with buboes, her breaths shallow and ragged. Her husband, his eyes red from weeping, clutches her hand, his voice breaking as he begs Matthias to save her. Matthias kneels his robe, brushing the filthy floor, and opens his satchel, the leather creaking as he pulls out the last of his mint. He scatters it on her sores, its sharp scent a fleeting shield against the room's decay, and murmurs a prayer, his voice hoarse. The woman's eyes follow him, wide with fear, and Matthias feels the weight of her hope, a burden he cannot bear. He knows she will not survive, her fate sealed by the plague's relentless grip, and the knowledge cuts deeper, another crack in his fracturing mind. The detachment comes unbidden, a shield against the horror. Matthias moves through the motions, mint, murmuring prayers, checking sores, his hands steady, his heart distant. The woman's face blurs into the other's, a gallery of the dying that fills his thoughts. He steps back, his cane tapping, and leaves the husband to his grief, the woman's coughs echoing in his ears. The detachment is a survival mechanism, a way to keep moving, but it frightens him, a sign that he is losing himself to the plague's weight. He laughs again, a sharp, hollow sound that echoes in the empty street, and catches himself, his gloved hand pressing against the mask, as if to hold the pieces of his mind together. The laughter is a crack, a fracture, a warning that his sanity is slipping, eroded by the endless tide of death. The historical context of this mental strain is rooted in the Black Death's overwhelming devastation. By 1348, the plague has killed nearly half of London's population, turning a vibrant city into a charnel house. Plague doctors, like Matthias, often untrained barber-surgeons, were thrust into roles of unimaginable horror, facing death daily with tools that failed and prayers that went unanswered. The psychological toll was immense, unacknowledged in a time when the mind's health was barely understood. The Church's teachings, dominant in the era, saw despair as a sin, a failure of faith, and Matthias's struggle is compounded by this. Belief, his doubt a rebellion against the divine will that many claimed sent the plague. The isolation, the fear, the constant exposure to suffering, they wore down even the strongest, and Matthias's fracturing mind is a reflection of this uncharted torment. Matthias's coping mechanisms are fragile, a patchwork of rituals to keep the darkness at bay. In another alley, he pauses, leaning against a wall, his cane planted in the mud. He pulls a flask of wine from his satchel, its contents sour but warm, and sips it through the mask's narrow opening, the liquid burning his throat. The wine is no solace, only a momentary dulling of the fear, the guilt, the loneliness. He thinks of other plague doctors, their beaked masks glimpsed in passing, their eyes hidden but haunted. They do not speak, do not share their burdens, for they too are fractured, each one a solitary figure in a city of death. Matthias wonders, if they laugh as he does, if they pray, if they see the faces of the dead in their dreams. The wine is gone now, the flask empty, and Matthias tucks it away, his hands trembling, the mask hiding the strain in his eyes. The streets are darker now, the fog thicker, the evening's chill seeping through his robe. Matthias passes a plague pit, its gaping maw filled with bodies, their limbs tangled, faces covered with shrouds. The stench is overwhelming, a sickly sweet rot that seeps through his mask, making his stomach churn. He murmurs a prayer, his voice lost in the wind, a futile gesture for souls already gone. The pit is a mirror of his mind, a chaos of loss and despair, each body a patient he could not save. He thinks of the boy in the cobbler's house, the woman in the hospital, their faces blending into Anna's, their cries echoing in his thoughts. The detachment falters, the grief rushing back, and Matthias grips his cane. its tap a steady rhythm against the tide of his fracturing mind. The city is a canvas of suffering, its streets a labyrinth of grief and fear. Matthias passes a church, its doors open, a priest's chant mingling with the cries of the sick from a nearby hospital. A market square, once alive with vendors, is now silent save for the scuttle of rats and the stench of rotting fruit. A child watches from a doorway, her eyes hollow, and Matthias turns away, unable to meet her gaze. The mask hides his face, but not his fear, not the tremor in his hands. As he grips his cane, he is a solitary figure, his beaked silhouette looming in the fog, his presence a reminder of the death that stalks them all. The townsfolk's whispers follow him, their fear a weight heavier than the robe, their blame a wound deeper than any lancet could cut. As evening deepens, Matthias returns to his attic room. The tanner's shop below silent, its stench of leather mingling with the city's decay. He lights a lantern, its flame flickering in the draught, casting shadows across the walls. He removes his mask, the straps leaving red marks on his scalp, the air cool against his sweat-soaked face. The robe falls to the floor, it stains a map of the day's work, and Matthias sits on his pallet, the straw pricking through his thin blanket. He sips the last of his wine, the flask trembling in his hands, and murmurs a prayer, the words empty, a ritual to fill the silence. The bells toll faintly, their rhythm a reminder of the night's approach, and Matthias closes his eyes, the faces of the dead waiting in his dreams. His mind is fracturing, a slow unraveling under the weight of death, but he will rise at dawn, down his mask and walk again, a solitary figure in a city of ghosts. The evening sky darkens over London in 1348, its last light swallowed by the fog that clings to the city's narrow streets, thick with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges through the mud, his waxed robe heavy with the day's stains, his beaked mask muffling each labored breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's fade into a distant murmur, their rhythm drowned by the creak of death carts and the soft cries of the grieving. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones slick with filth and the weight of a city's sorrow, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the evening brings death to his door. The plague spares no one, not even those who fight it, and every patient, every touch, every breath risks his own life. Families, mad with grief, may turn on him, their desperation a blade as sharp as the disease. Matthias walks a razor's edge, his mask no shield against fate. Let's follow him through the darkening hours, where death is a constant shadow, and survival is a fleeting hope in a city of ghosts. Matthias moves through a narrow alley near the Thames, its waters black and sluggish, reflecting the dim glow of a clouded moon. His boots sink into the mud, the cobblestones slick with refuse, the air thick with the sickly sweet odor of death that seeps through his mask's fading herbs. The glass eyes fog with each exhale, narrowing his vision to a hazy tunnel of shadows and shuttered houses. His satchel, nearly empty, sags against his hip, its strap biting into his shoulder, the last of his mint and prayers spent on patients who will not see dawn. The cane in his hand, worn smooth by countless days, taps a steady rhythm, a lifeline. In the silence that surrounds him, the townsfolk avoid him, their faces pale, their eyes darting away as his beaked silhouette looms in the fog. A woman whispers a curse, her voice sharp, and Matthias feels the sting. A reminder that he is both needed and despised, a figure teetering on the edge of life and death. The plague is a relentless hunter, And Matthias knows he is not immune. Each patient he touches, each sore he probes, each breath he takes in a red-crossed house risks his own life. The mask, stuffed with lavender and cloves, is no true shield. Its herbs a superstition that fails against the fleas that carry the disease. Matthias has seen other doctors fall, their robes becoming shrouds, their masks discarded in plague pits. A colleague, a man named Simon, died last month, his neck swollen with buboes, his eyes glassy as Matthias closed them. The memory haunts him, a warning that death is always near, waiting in the air, on his gloves, in the very tools he carries. His robe, stiff with wax, is meant to repel infection, but it is stained with the blood and pus of the dying, each mark a potential harbinger of his own end. Matthias coughs, a dry rasp that makes his heart race, each symptom a question, each moment a gamble with fate. His next stop is a blacksmith's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the stench of iron and sickness. A man lies on a straw pallet, his chest heaving, his neck swollen with buboes, black sores that pulse with pain. His son, a broad-shouldered youth, stands nearby, his eyes red with grief, his fists clenched. Matthias kneels, his robe rustling, his cane tapping the floorboards, and examines the man, his gloved fingers probing the sores, the heat of fever radiating through the leather. The blacksmith's breaths are shallow, his eyes unfocused, and Matthias scatters the last of his mint, its sharp scent a fleeting shield against the room's decay. He murmurs a prayer, his voice hoarse, knowing it's more for the son than the dying man. The son's gaze is heavy, a mix of hope and rage, and Matthias feels the tension, the threat of a grief that could turn violent. The son steps closer, his voice low and trembling, accusing Matthias of failing, of bringing death rather than healing. Matthias stiffens, his hand tightening on his cane, the mask hiding his fear. He has heard stories of plague doctors attacked, their robes torn, their masks shattered by families mad with loss. A doctor in Cheapside was beaten last week, his body left in the street, blamed for the plague's relentless march. Matthias speaks softly, his voice muffled, offering words of comfort that feel empty even to him. He steps back, his cane tapping, and leaves the house, the son's curses following him into the fog. The encounter leaves him shaken, his heart pounding, the weight of his vulnerability heavier than the robe that clings to his skin. Death is not just in the plague, but in the hands of those he tries to save. Their despair a weapon as deadly as the disease. Matthias's fear is a constant companion, a shadow that grows with each step. He coughs again, the sound sharp in the quiet street, and wonders if it's the plague or the strain of his work. His body aches, his shoulders sore from the satchel's weight, his scalp raw from the mask's straps. The robe is a furnace, the wax melting in the evening's chill, sticking to his sweat-soaked skin. The mask's glass eyes fog, the herbs. Spent, their scent a faint whisper against the city's stench. Matthias pauses, leaning against a wall, his cane planted in the mud, and takes a sip from his flask, the wine sour but warm, a momentary shield against the fear that gnaws at him. The wine does little, its burn a fleeting distraction from the dread that every breath, every touch, could be his last. The historical context of this danger is rooted in the Black Death's indiscriminate wrath. By 1348, the plague has killed nearly half of London's population, sparing neither rich nor poor, neither priest nor physician. Plague doctors like Matthias, often untrained barber surgeons, were at constant risk, their exposure to the sick making them as vulnerable as their patients. The fleas that carried the disease, unknown to Matthias, lurked in the straw beds, on the clothes of the dying, in the very air he breathed. The mask and robe, designed to protect, were little more than symbols, their wax and herbs powerless against the true cause. Families, driven by grief, often turned on doctors, blaming them for deaths they could not prevent, their anger a reflection of a society unraveling under the plague's weight. Matthias's fear is a product of this world, a reality where death is not just a possibility but a daily companion. Matthias's next stop is a weaver's house, its air thick with the smell of wool and sickness. A young girl lies on a pallet, her body racked with coughs, her neck swollen with buboes, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her mother, her face gaunt, clutches a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Matthias kneels, his robe brushing the filthy floor, and opens his satchel, the lever creaking as he pulls out a small amulet, a bone charm inscribed with Latin words. He places it on the girl's chest, murmuring a prayer to Saint Sebastian, his voice hoarse, knowing it's a gesture for the mother's sake. The girl's coughs grow weaker, her breaths rattling, and Matthias feels the weight of her impending death, another crack in his resolve. The mother's eyes follow him, her hope a burden he cannot carry, and he steps back, his cane tapping, the girl's face joining the others in his mind. The mother's voice rises, sharp with desperation, accusing Matthias of witchcraft, of bringing the plague rather than curing it. She lunges, her hands grabbing at his robe, her nails scraping the wax. Matthias stumbles, his cane slipping in the mud, his heart racing as he pulls away. He raises his hands, his voice soft, pleading, but the mother's rage is afire, her grief a blade. He escapes to the street, her curses echoing, the fog swallowing her voice. The encounter leaves him trembling, his breath short, the mask a suffocating weight. He coughs again, the sound sharp, and feels the fear tighten its grip, the possibility of the plague in his own body, a shadow that grows with each moment. Death is at his door, not just in the houses he visits, but in the air he breathes, the hands that reach for him, the doubt that erodes his will. Matthias's coping mechanisms are fragile, a patchwork of rituals to keep the fear at bay. In a quiet alley, he pauses, leaning against a wall, his cane planted in the mud. He pulls his flask from his satchel, its contents nearly gone, and sips the sour wine. Its burn a fleeting shield against the terror. He thinks of other plague doctors, their beaked masks glimpsed in passing, their eyes hidden but haunted. He heard of one, a man named Robert, who fell to the plague last week, his robe a shroud by the end. The story is a warning, a reminder, that Matthias's tools, his prayers, his mask, they are no true protection. He murmurs a prayer, his voice hoarse, the words empty, a habit to fill the silence. The silver cross at his neck, worn smooth by his touch, is his only anchor, a relic of a life where death was not a daily companion. The city is a canvas of loss, its streets a labyrinth of grief and fear. Matthias passes a plague pit, its gaping, more filled with bodies, their limbs tangled, faces covered with shrouds. The stench is overwhelming, a sickly sweet rot that seeps through his mask, making his stomach churn. He murmurs a prayer, his voice lost in the wind, a futile gesture for souls already gone. The pit is a mirror of his fear, a chaos of death that waits for him, each body a patient he could not save. He thinks of the blacksmith, the girl, their faces blending into his sister's, their cries echoing in his thoughts. The fear is a weight, heavier than the robe, deeper than the mud that clings to his boots. Matthias grips his cane, its tap a steady rhythm against the tide of his dread. As evening deepens, Matthias moves toward his final stop, a merchant's house near the city's edge. The streets are darker now, the fog thicker, the air heavy with the chill of night. The bells toll faintly, their rhythm a reminder of the hours slipping away, each one a test of his endurance. The merchant's house is silent, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the stench of sickness. A woman lies on a pallet, her face pale, her breaths shallow, her husband kneeling beside her, his eyes red with grief. Matthias kneels, his robe brushing the floor, and offers a prayer, his voice hoarse, knowing it's all he has left. The husband's gaze is heavy, a mix of hope and despair, and Matthias feels the threat, the possibility of another outburst, another hand reaching for his robe. He steps back, his cane tapping, and leaves the house, the woman's fate sealed, his own life hanging. By a thread, Matthias's body aches, the robe a furnace, the mask a suffocating prison. His cough persists, a dry rasp that makes his heart race, each symptom a question he cannot answer. The satchel is empty, its contents spent, his prayers reduced to a murmur. He is a solitary figure, his beaked silhouette looming in the fog. His presence a reminder of the death that stalks them all. The townsfolk's curses follow him, their fear a weight heavier than the robe, their blame a wound deeper than any lancet could cut. Death is at his door, in the plague, in the hands of the grieving, in the doubt that erodes his will. Yet he walks on, driven by a stubborn duty, a flicker of hope, or perhaps the fear of stopping, of facing the silence of his own heart. The night settles heavily over London in 1348, its darkness deepened by the fog that curls through the city's narrow streets, thick with the stench of decay and despair. Dr. Matthias Varn, our weary plague doctor, trudges toward his attic room, his waxed robe dragging through the mud, his beaked mask muffling each labored breath. The tolling bells of St. Paul's are silent now, replaced by the creak of death carts and the distant sobs of the grieving, a quiet chorus of loss. As you rest in your soft bed, dear listener, far from the cobblestones, slick with filth and the weight of a city's sorrow, let your mind drift to Matthias's world, where the night is a heavy curtain falling on a day of relentless toil. His work, futile as it often was, echoes through time, a testament to the grim courage of plague doctors, their strange masks and desperate rituals early whispers of a science yet to come. Let's follow Matthias through the late evening, where exhaustion claims his body, and the legacy of his struggle lingers like a fading lantern in a city of ghosts. Matthias moves through a darkened alley near the Thames, its waters black and still, reflecting the faint glow of a clouded moon. His boots sink into the mud, the cobblestones slick with refuse, the air thick with the sickly sweet odor of death that seeps through his mask's spent herbs. The glass eyes fog with each exhale, narrowing his vision to a hazy tunnel of shadows and shuttered houses. His satchel, empty of theriac and mint, hangs light against his hip, its strap still biting into his shoulder. The cane in his hand, worn smooth by countless days, taps a slow rhythm, a lifeline in the silence that surrounds him. The townsfolk are gone now, their homes dark, their fear a lingering presence in the fog. Matthias is alone, his beaked silhouette a solitary figure, his heart heavy with the day's failures and the faint hope that his work might matter beyond this night. His final stop was a merchant's house, its door marked with a red cross, the air inside thick with the stench of sickness. A woman lay on a straw pallet, her face pale, her breaths shallow, her husband kneeling beside her, his eyes red with grief. Matthias offered a prayer, his voice hoarse, knowing it was all he had left. The woman's fate was sealed, her body succumbing to the plague's relentless grip. And Matthias left the house, the husband's sobs echoing in his ears. Now, as he trudges toward his attic room, the weight of that encounter joins the others, the tailor's daughter, the cobbler's boy, the countless faces that haunt his mind. His body aches, his shoulders sore from the satchel strap, his scalp raw from the mask's straps, his cough a dry rasp that lingers in his chest. Each symptom a shadow of fear. Matthias reaches the tanner's shop, its stench of leather mingling with the city's decay, and climbs the narrow stairs to his attic room. The door creaks as he enters, the room small and shadowed, its walls stained with damp and soot. A cracked window lets in the night's chill, the fog curling through the gaps, and Matthias lights a lantern, its flame flickering in the draught, casting shadows that dance across the walls like the ghosts of his patients. He removes his mask, the straps leaving red marks on his scalp, the air cool against his sweat-soaked face. The robe falls to the floor, it stains a map of the day's work, and Matthias collapses onto his straw pallet, the coarse fibers pricking through his thin blanket. He sips the last of his wine, the flask trembling in his hands, its sour burn a fleeting shield against the despair that clings to him like the fog outside. The exhaustion is bone deep, a weight that pins him to the pallet, his body a map of aches and bruises. His hands tremble, his fingers still feeling the heat of buboes, the slickness of blood from his lancet's bite. His mind is a fractured mirror, reflecting the faces of the dead, their eyes, their cries, their final breaths. Matthias closes his eyes, but sleep is elusive, the faces waiting in the darkness, blending with his sisters, his mothers, their voices a chorus of loss. He murmurs a prayer to Saint Rock, the words empty now, a ritual to fill the silence. The silver cross at his neck, worn smooth by his touch, is his only anchor, a relic of a life before the plague stole everything. The lantern's light flickers, a faint warmth in a world gone cold, and Matthias feels the weight of his day, his life, his failures, pressing him into the straw. Yet, Matthias's work, futile as it often was, carries a legacy that echoes through time. Plague doctors like him, armed with crude tools and desperate rituals, were the first to face the Black Death head-on. Their courage, a flicker of light in a dark age. Their masks, their robes, their lancets and herbs, they were symbols of a fight. Against an enemy no one understood, a fight that laid the groundwork for the science of epidemiology. Matthias does not know this, cannot see beyond the fog and death of 1348, but his efforts, his records of symptoms, his observations of the plague's spread, they contribute to a slow awakening. The miasma theory, the belief in bad air, would eventually give way to discoveries of fleas and bacteria. But Matthias's daily struggle, his grim persistence, is a step toward that future, a whisper of progress in a world of superstition. The historical context of this legacy is rooted in the Black Death's devastating sweep. By 1348, the plague has killed nearly half of Europe, reshaping society, economy, and medicine. Plague doctors, often untrained barber surgeons like Matthias, were thrust into roles of unimaginable horror, their work a blend of ancient theories and desperate improvisation. Their masks and robes, designed to protect against miasma, were early attempts at infection control, flawed but forward-thinking. Their records, scrawled in candlelit rooms, noted patterns, swollen lymph nodes, blackened fingers, fevered eyes that would later inform physicians like John Snow, who traced cholera's spread centuries later. Matthias's prayers, his amulets, his theriac, they were futile, but his presence, his willingness to walk among the dying, was a courage that history remembers, even if it does not know his name. Matthias's role as a plague doctor is a paradox, a figure both revered and reviled. The townsfolk need him, their pleas echoing in every red-crossed house. But they fear him, their whispers branding him a demon, a harbinger of death. His mask, meant to protect, makes him monstrous, his robe a barrier that isolates him from the world he serves. He thinks of the other doctors, their beaked silhouettes glimpsed in passing, their eyes hidden but haunted. Some fell to the plague, their robes shrouds by week's end. Others fled, unable to bear the weight. Matthias stays, driven by duty, guilt, or perhaps the fear of stopping, of facing the silence of his own heart. His work is a testament to resilience, a refusal to surrender, even as his body and mind fray under the strain. The night deepens, the fog thicker now, the city silent, save for the occasional creak of a cart or the sob of a mourner. Matthias lies on his pallet, the lantern's light fading, the shadows growing longer. He thinks of the day's patients, the merchant's wife, the cobbler's boy, the countless others whose names he never learned. Their faces blur into his. Sisters, his mothers, a gallery of loss that fills his dreams. He coughs, a dry rasp that makes his heart race, each symptom a question he cannot answer. The fear of the plague, of death at his door, is a constant shadow, but so too is the fear of losing himself, of becoming nothing more than a mask, a robe, a cane tapping through a city of ghosts. The legacy of plague doctors like Matthias lives on in stories, in images of beaked figures that haunt our collective memory. They are icons of a dark past, a time when medicine was more ritual than reason, when courage meant facing the unknown with tools that failed. Matthias does not know the word epidemiology, does not know that his observations, his persistence, will echo through centuries, but he feels the weight of his work, the faint hope that it matters. He clings to the silver cross, its edges a comfort, against his skin, and murmurs a final prayer, the words a whisper in the dark. The lantern flickers, its light a fragile shield against the night, and Matthias closes his eyes, the faces of the dead waiting in his dreams. The city is a canvas of loss, its streets a labyrinth of grief and fear. Matthias's life, his work, his courage, they are echoes in time, faint but enduring, a testament to those who walked among the dying, masked and misunderstood. The fog wraps London in its cold embrace, the night a heavy curtain falling on a day of toil. Matthias is a solitary figure, his beaked mask a symbol of both hope and horror, his legacy a whisper in the darkness, a flicker of light for a future he will never see. As the night claims him, his exhaustion a weight heavier than the robe. Matthias rests, if only for a moment, before the dawn calls him back to the fight.